Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to the Gospel Underground Podcast. This is episode 125, Game Planning for the Summer and Beyond. I am broadcasting live, live for me from the worldwide headquarters of the Gospel Underground here in Blacksburg, Virginia. Jesse was going to join me this week, but we've had some really challenging, difficult circumstances arise in our church community. For those of you out here are praying people, I just want to ask you to pray as we begin this episode today for Katie Johnson, our pastor Brett Johnson's wife and mother of the Johnson kids. Is really facing a medical challenge with an aneurysm in her brain. She was having some vertigo-type symptoms, and thankfully an eye doctor looked at some photos of Katie and then recommended a scan, which showed some sort of mass. I was concerned it was maybe a tumor, but it turns out to be a very challenging and dangerous situation with an aneurysm. And so pray for them. They are heading to UVA to be for a consultation as well as surgery soon to alleviate this issue. So pray for that. Jesse is on point for the Johnsons. They are lifetime friends. Jenny and Jesse and Brett and Katie are super close. And I said, Jesse, no, you don't need to come on the podcast this week. Take care of business for everyone involved. And so today was really going to be a simple episode. As we head forward, I wanted to do a little bit of kind of regathering of ourselves here on the podcast. Obviously, we just finished this series on embodiment and the importance of that to so many issues in our cultural moment. And then last time I had my friend and mentor Mike Extencamper to talk about humility, posture in the world, particularly who's the hero of our stories, that it shouldn't be us, right? Having Christ central and the hero for all that we do is very important, particularly those who serve others in his name. And so I wanted to share today where we're headed in the podcast, because I think the next 18 months, guys, I really want to encourage you, if you're a regular listener, we've seen our listenership double in the last year. I want to encourage all the undergrounders out there. The next 18 months on this podcast, I think, are going to be very important, particularly for the voice that we want to have in the borderlands between the church and culture. I think the next 18 months of this podcast will be super helpful in that. And so if you look at the purpose of our ministry, the Gospel Underground exists to advance the mission of God in the borderlands between the church and culture, that we value the people, the ideas, the things that happen in that swirl between the church and the cultural spaces that God sends his people, right? And those cultural spaces are different depending on what time in history the church is existing and living, having its being, as well as geographically and social, culturally, politically, all the things that swirl in the borderlands where the gospel goes forth and people are meeting Jesus, right? And so as we head forward, I wanted to lay out a little bit of a game plan. Over the next 7 or so episodes, maybe 8, I'm going to do a series called What Sacred Games? There's a reality that when cultures shift religiously, and I don't think there's any religiously neutral cultures. Human beings are worshiping creatures. We're made in the image of God. We're made for God. Now, that goes in all sorts of directions. We're separated from God because of sin, but we long for transcendence. We long for permanence. We long for eternity. And so human beings create things, either gods and goddesses to worship or cultural religious systems by which we pour out our passions and desires. And one of the foolish things about Western culture in particular is this idea that we are going to have kind of this religious neutral nothing space. Maybe we reject the religions of our foremothers and fathers and kind of create new things. Now, there was a very prescient thinker in the late 19th century named Friedrich Nietzsche. Many of you are familiar with his work, whether it's his autobiographical work, Ecce Homo, or Beyond on the genealogy of morals, or Beyond Good and Evil, or some of the parables like Thus Spoke Zarathustra. He's also the person that's coined the phrase, or at least popularized it, God is dead. in the parable known as the Madman. And in that parable, he's looking at what does civilization that he was living in, right? He was a European continental guy. What does civilization do if it puts to death God? Now, by that, he meant the highest philosophical and moral principles of culture put to death. What then happens? And he said this very interesting statement. He said, what sacred games will we have to create? Or what festivals, that'll be an interesting podcast series, what festivals of atonement, right, to assuage our guilt and what we're doing, will we have to engage in? And so rather than creating a secular space, Western civilization has created a space for lots of sacred games. That what he predicted has come to fruition, that we have made these things in our culture as replacement religions. And we're going to look at some of those as we look at the borderlands. So power games, how people abuse power, connection games, right? Church replacement things and neo-tribalism through brand identity or workout situations, right? Pleasure games, right? How we indulge pleasures and consumer games. How consumer culture has a very religious tone to it. Political games, obviously, our culture is steeped with it. War games, how we in our tribalism are now creating wars with one another, whether that turns into actual internal conflict is yet to be seen, but certainly this is a sacred game, a war game we've created. And then truth games, the games we play with truth. Epistemic, how what's true and not, religious and cultural truth and pluralisms. Our culture has created these things as sort of trying to fit us for a life without God. And so our next series will be what? Sacred games. And then I'm going to take a little time, probably in the fall, winter. Obviously, we don't time these things perfectly because we podcast on our own time. Roughly once or twice a month is our goal. And we're going to head maybe around fall and winter of next year about being winsome in a warring culture where culture is consuming itself with tribalism and internecine fighting. How can we be winsome people in that culture? So we're talking about listening, common ground with others, the value of the image of God in all people. As far as it's up to you, live at peace with all, but with conviction, witness to Jesus and the gospel. Winsomeness in a warring culture will be a follow-up to sacred games. And then finally, following that, I hope to do a series called Witness in a Warring Culture. Because we're not just simply trying to be nice and get along. That's not just the simple goal. Certainly gentleness and respectful engagement, thoughtful engagement is our goal. But I'm going to share a little bit of kind of the bread and butter, nuts and bolts training that I do around the country with other churches and such to try to think through how can we shape a culture that is a good witness. And how can we be a good witness to Jesus Christ amidst the warring factions of our culture and civilization. And so that's where we're headed, guys. Just want to give you a heads up preview, hopefully starting in the next few weeks. What sacred games, looking at our cultural games we've created to replace religion, winsomeness, how can we be winsome people, people of peace in a warring world, and then how can we particularly live amongst others in a way that we might share our lives and share the gospel in effective ways. And we're going to hit these grounds on the podcast. Please keep the Johnson family in prayer, guys. Certainly a young mom and wife and leader in our church. Katie, we're praying with you. Hopefully all of you guys around the country, around the world listening to this will pray for the Johnson family as well. We're very grateful for that. We're grateful for you guys listening in with us, right? The Gospel Underground podcast we produce, Jesse and I with the Bonhoeffer House. We take reviews, 5 stars. Thank you for that. Send your comments, feedback to us, questions you might want us to take up here on the podcast. We'd love to engage with you as many of you send in stuff and write and interact with us. We hope the next 18 months or so as we travel will equip us well to engage people, right? Precious human persons in the dialogue in the borderlands between the church and culture where the gospel of Jesus Christ might go forth and we might lift up Jesus as a true, better king and a different leader for our precarious times. Thanks for joining me today for this brief episode. We hope to see you out there in the borderlands. God bless you guys. Peace.